Dallas Podcast Gate, quick refresher here. Malik Hooker went on Keyshawn's podcast, okay, and questioned Micah's commitment to his podcast, which Micah then took issue with on Twitter, then he deleted it. So here's Plaxico Burress on his podcast with LeVar Arrington. But we have a quote here. This would never happen in the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room. We address you to your face as a grown man in Pittsburgh. That's the difference between playing in a locker room with the Steelers and Giants. Wow, the Giants got a shout out there.
Well, he did win a Super Bowl.
Yeah. Versus the Dallas Cowboys. Take that. Brew your reaction.
Agreed. Agreed with Plaxico Burress. This is what I've been saying for years. The Dallas Cowboys, first and foremost, are a circus. They are an entertainment entity. Okay. And then down the line, they become a football franchise. Mm-hmm. But it's not the first priority. They make tons of money. They're talked about ad nauseum. And Jerry's all over the place because that is their first priority. It is not, as much as they talk about Super Bowls, winning a Super Bowl. And I agree with Plaxico 100% that in football franchises, where it is about winning first, winning second, winning third, this would not happen because players, Nick, would know. I just got in the league. Let me not start a podcast. I haven't won anything. Or they would know not to stay out of another man's pockets, right? Don't get in, mess with his money. That's what they always say. But when your owner is constantly running his mouth, talking about all manner of things, every microphone that's put in front of his face, he's willing to talk. Now your star defensive player is like, hey, let me do the same thing and talk about stuff. And now Malik Hooker, your free safety who doesn't get the attention probably that he thinks he deserves, is going on a podcast saying everything. Saying stuff that other people would only say off the record. All right? And so this is the Cowboys. This is what they do. Yep. And this is why, Nick, as much talent as they have had the last several years, their culture is a problem there. And everybody can see it.
So this is where I think clearly the Micah podcast had rubbed Malik the wrong way, and that was a legitimate gripe. This is where I think we lose the plot a bit.
Oh.
Because with respect to Plaxico Burress, let's talk about those two organizations that he talked about. The Pittsburgh Steelers. 4 years. In fact, he's been on the show, Andrew Filippone. 4 years, Andrew Filippone hosted a radio show in Pittsburgh. He still does, but this part's no longer going on. That every Tuesday, Ben Roethlisberger would go on intentionally 1 hour before the start of Mike Tomlin's weekly press conference and drop little bombs that Tomlin then had to respond to improvisationally at the press conference because it had just been said right when Tomlin was going up there. And the Steelers that's not ownership, that's the Rooney family. And that was because they had a player who wanted the attention and was going to be a little hard to deal with. The New York Giants and the Mara family, we had a minor national breakdown about their diva receiver for 2 years about kicking nets and Instagram photos and boat trips. So this idea that this is part and parcel with the Cowboys rather than part and parcel to talented, maybe a little over his skis star player that feels like, what are you going to do to me? That is not a Cowboys problem. That is, pick your franchise, and he just said two, and I instantly had two examples of when something like this is going on. So I don't buy that is a Cowboys problem. I do buy that Brew was right, that Micah's podcast could cause issues, because it clearly has. But I don't think that's a Cowboys thing. That's not a Jerry Jones thing.
Can I Micah's podcast.
Sure.
It's not a huge money maker.
Well, here's the thing. I think
it might be for him.
I think for
huge money maker.
I mean, It's probably
making millions of dollars off the podcast.
Well, but remember, he's still in his rookie salary too.
I mean, I don't know. He just got that big promotion at
Right, he's
Bleacher
the
Report. I bet
president
it's a
now.
big deal. Yeah, but go ahead.
If I was Micah Parsons, I'll be me for the time being.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, you know what? I'm thinking of taking up, is it called hand gliding or hang gliding?
Hang gliding.
Hang gliding, when you go here and you launch yourself off of a mountain.
Yeah, hang.
I'm like, should I do that? And you're like, no. And I'm like, Dusty, should I do that? You're like, no. Like, should I do that? You're like, no. Brew, do you think I should do that? Do you think? And everyone is saying no. I'm like, I'm going to do it anyways. If Micah went around to people he respected, he'd be like, what do you think about my podcast? You think I should do a podcast? I think you would hear a lot more no.
Oh,
This is a pain
I totally
than
disagree
yeses.
with you. You don't really?
You think you would hear a lot of yeses? Like, yeah, man, do it.
Yeah, I think.
Seems like it's.
I think if you looked at it, if you, again, to use your ridiculous analogy,
It's not ridiculous. I love it.
If a lot of, if Ernie Johnson
Yeah.
was a big time hang glider and Scott Van Pelt was a big time hang glider, you might be like, you know what? This is the way to go. Yeah, I mean, if you're Micah, LeBron's got a podcast, Draymond's got a podcast, Richard Sherman's got a podcast, a lot of guys.
You know what else they have?
The Kelseys have a podcast.
Yeah.
I understand.
Jewelry.
Right. Thank you. So
and they're veterans.
Yeah, so-
That's my thing.
No, I understand that.
I don't mind a player having a podcast, but mature a little bit, win a little bit.
And that's well taken. But why I think that Micah's not. And here's the other thing that I think is unfortunate and unfair from not unfair. There's a good and a bad to it. One of the reasons that Micah's podcast has any traction at all is because he's a Cowboy. But it's also one of the reasons that it's the only one of these that gets dissected. It's the only one of these guys that we are listening to every word and finding stuff for. There's too many podcasts. There's not enough time. So, like, it's easier for you're only these shows and those things.
Because of the Cowboys.
Yes.
Because they're entertaining.
Yeah.
They're entertaining.
But so do you think?
That's why.
Let me ask you this, because this is where my pushback with you on, even though I think you have been correct about the potential issues. Malik Hooker made it clear. Malik Hooker proved your point.
He probably wasn't just speaking for himself, to be honest.
Agreed. So on that one, you were right on. Like, flatly. You were like, there might be a teammate that has an issue with it, theoretically, and then a teammate's like, hey, guys, I have an issue with it. I think you're focused too much on the podcast. So that was correct. Where I disagree with you is this. If the Cowboys, in trying to sign CD and sign Dak, were like, you know what? We have to trade Micah. We have to trade him. If they had done it this offseason, traded Micah, what's the most serious organization in football? The New England Patriots.
Oh, yeah, we're locked
They
in.
traded him to the Patriots for 2 first-round picks. You think he quits the podcast? Because I don't. I don't think it's a Cowboys thing. I think that if he were traded, he's still doing it. And then maybe we don't care about it anymore. But you understand what I mean? That's where I think it's unfair.
But I think a serious organization could say to him, look, we'd rather you not do the podcast. The Cowboys can't say that because the owner's running his mouth every opportunity he gets.
See, but why would he listen to him? Why? That's my thing is if he wants to do it,
Because there's drama in the
players in the
team.
locker room,
It's an unforced error in the team, within the organization.
got it.
it's just unnecessary.
My point is that I don't think if Micah Parsons wants to do this podcast, I don't think there is anyone that can stop him. He is too good of a player. He's too good.
He's unstoppable.
You understand what I mean? Like
he's a great player.
He's a great player.
Is he a great podcaster?
He's trying to be.
Here's the thing.
All right, go ahead,
if
then
they really, and I don't think they built the roster to win the Super Bowl this offseason. All right, so but let's say with last year, they still are S-Bob because they're the Cowboys. But if they really want to be serious and all in on, we've heard that a lot, all in. You know what all in should mean? Jerry Jones saying, you know what? I'm no longer going to be standing outside the locker room after every game giving an impromptu press conference. Mike McCarthy is now the voice of the Dallas Cowboys on Sundays. I'd like to see him even give up his weekday radio or weekly radio appearance.
I like that.
Yeah, of course, we like it. Is Clark Hunt doing that stuff?
No, but
Robert Kraft doing any of that? The last 2 dynasties we've seen?
But I guess don't you think some of this is a little passé? Don't you think that in today's NFL, if anyone's like, don't do these things, that some of these guys are like, What are the Chiefs? So you want us to be more like the Chiefs? Because they have a popular podcast.
If it's a distraction, if the Dolphins had a ping pong table, they're like, this is a distraction.
No, hold on. Remember, Wilds, remember that wasn't actually what happened.
I know, but then they were like,
that wasn't
designing it. But
Tyreek is doing that's my point.
Again,
like, it's
he's
just
a veteran though, and he's got a championship, not with the Dolphins, but he's got a championship. If Jerry Jones gave up his pot or his statements that he's making every week, and then he could go to Micah and say, look, it's all football this year. Let's go get this ring. I'm giving up my public pronouncements. We want you just to focus on football and give up the podcast. I think he'd do it.
We got to move on to Dak, but I'm going to solve this, and then we're going to move on.
Okay.
He actually just needs a co-host. For real. He just needs a co-host. So when you're in the pre-production meeting, it's like, then I'm going to talk about our defensive plan against the Eagles. Like, no. Let's talk about an old memory from high school. Like, oh, that one's good. Let's do that.
I can't wait till he has Malik Hooker on. That's what they need to do. Clear the air.
Yeah. Well, you're trying to promote the podcast.
They should. I mean, if he's going to do it right.
Oh, Hobbs is yelling at me because we have to get into a pipe dream of his. Former NFL executive Mike Tannenbaum said the Raiders are producers' favorite